cognitive distortions. Today we're going to cover the spiritual aspects of our cognitive distortions. So we're going to look at things from a spiritual angle. So you'll find this particular discussion to be especially comprehensive when it comes to healing our mental health. As I said, we have a lot of information to cover. So we'll want to jump directly into that information right now. Today, we're talking about cognitive distortions and the spiritual aspects of our cognitive distortions. So what constitutes mental illness? Really, if anyone has a belief that is detrimental to them or to others, or a way of thinking that's detrimental to them or to others, where it disrupts their life, that would be categorized as mental illness. Okay, so just picture a man who believes he's a superhero. Specifically, he believes that he can fly. Okay, so a man that believes he can fly is often found perched in windows up high or perched on the ledge of buildings. And he's about to jump. He's not suicidal. He simply believes he can fly. Now, he is not a superhero, by the way. He's just a normal human like you and I. He would be judged as having mental illness, and accurately so, because he believes something that is untrue, that is false and detrimental to himself, so that it could cause him harm or could also cause others harm if he were to jump off of a building or out of a window. So what he believes is false, and so the false belief is at the base of mental illness. Now look at yourself, for instance. Every one of us at some point has cognitive distortion, which is a big psychological term for thoughts that are false or thoughts that are distorted so that they are detrimental to the self or to others. These are beliefs that are distorted. So all of us have a belief that's distorted or false. Maybe it's not as extreme as believing, well, if I just jump out of this window, I'll be able to fly. Maybe it's something a little more subtle. Do you have a cognitive distortion? We might believe something that other people can't see, so they don't know that we have mental illness. They may see us come to work on time. They may see us doing well with our family. They may see us succeeding in life in various areas, but in the back of our mind, we have a distorted belief, such as, I'm not lovable. Do you see how a belief like I'm not lovable is not only not true for any human, but it is also destructive to their life? It's detrimental. If a person believes they're not lovable, there are so many negative results that happen. So many negative outcomes come from believing you're not lovable. I can't go into them all, but for instance, a person that believes they're not lovable would not work to approach others, or let's say they're talking about the opposite sex, or they wouldn't try to attract others or the opposite sex. Now, if someone doesn't try to attract anyone and they never try to approach anyone because they have this belief that they're not lovable anyway, so why try? Then they say, well, you know what? It's been 10 years and I've been single, or it's been 10 years and I haven't made any friends. And now that reinforces the belief that they're not lovable. They say, well, that's probably because I'm not lovable. But really, it's because they believe they're not lovable. So therefore, they don't put the effort in attracting. They don't put the effort in approaching. And therefore, they're getting a detrimental outcome in their life. But since it's subtle, it's under the surface, many people don't recognize that person has mental illness. But if you are holding on to cognitive distortions, detrimental beliefs, then you are housing and cultivating mental illness. So let's root it out right now. The key to healing from our trauma is rooting out cognitive distortions, detrimental beliefs. So if you're on our Zoom call, I'm going to share a chart with you. And if you're on TikTok, I'm just going to try to explain as we go here. But you can get into our Zoom call and take a look at this chart by going to the link on my bio. Mindfree.org takes you to a website, and then it shows you on the website where you can join us live on our Zoom call. So what we're going to be looking at is a chart of cognitive distortions. Now, again, if you're just joining us, cognitive distortions are beliefs that are detrimental. They're beliefs that are detrimental to us. And the problem with detrimental beliefs is that they harm our life, they get in the way of our life, and they're potentially damaging to ourselves and others. So they keep us in mental illness. So we're also going to be taking a look at how exactly we can root these out using spirituality. We're going to look at the spiritual aspects today of cognitive distortions. So you'll want to take notes if you're on the call and try to create a little chart like this. This chart and the cognitive distortions we're covering, I wouldn't call it 100% comprehensive, meaning it doesn't have every distortion a person could possibly have, but it covers about 85 to 90%. So it's a fairly comprehensive chart of cognitive distortions. So go ahead and take note and try to make your own chart of these cognitive distortions. Now we have these split into 3 sections, and this is significant because that I know of, I am the first to split cognitive distortions into 3 simple sections. And these 3 sections are: I make the rules, nothing in moderation, all is bad. In other words, judgments and decrees is section number 1. This is believing that you can make the rules of life and the universe, and you can decide how things should go. The second category is extreme thinking. Extreme thinking, nothing in moderation, everything in extreme. We'll get into what that means. And then the last category is negative filtering. All is bad, looking at everything from the negative standpoint. Okay. So first we'll take a look at what these cognitive distortions are, and then we can analyze these things from a spiritual standpoint, because there's a spiritual aspect to these as well. And so as we're going along here, notice how these categories basically break down to a lapse in spirituality. And it's okay, because all of us are on a journey, spiritually speaking, to understand ourselves and to understand the universe around us. All of us are on a journey to understand ourselves and to understand the universe around us. So when you look at decrees and judgments, this is basically putting yourself in the seat of God. That is a spiritual lapse in judgment. Putting yourself in the seat of God. I can decide. It is up to me. And of course, that wouldn't be spiritually healthy, right? What would be spiritually healthy is to view ourselves as what we really are, which is human. Just human, meaning limited. We are limited. We are human. Notice the next category, extreme thinking. Extreme thinking is nothing in moderation, right? A spiritual person views everything in moderation. Not to use extreme language, but it's true. A spiritual person views everything in moderation. So this is a lapse in understanding the universe. Whereas the first one is a lapse in understanding the self, believing that the self is potentially God or has God-like responsibility and capability. Extreme thinking falls into misunderstanding how the universe actually works. Because when we're in extremes, we're seeing things as black or white, but the universe is in shades of gray, isn't it? There's so much nuance in the universe. And so we'll get into that to be specific. And then the last category, all is bad. When we analyze that from a spiritual standpoint, This is being the devil's advocate or siding with the devil. This is the idea that we're going to look at things in a way that's negative, that's dark, that's detrimental. That's why we call it negative filtering. And so we'll get into that, how we're being an advocate of the devil with that particular distortion. So let's start with this first category. Under decrees and judgments, I'm making the rules, there is blaming. Blaming is a cognitive distortion where we look to assign fault to someone or ourselves. Blaming is a cognitive distortion where we look to assign fault to someone or to ourselves. So this would be if something goes wrong, and then we go, this is your fault or this is their fault, right? This is that political party's fault. They're having this problem in our country. It's the other political. We're looking to blame for things that go wrong. Sometimes it's things that aren't even anyone's fault. It'd be a natural disaster, and you could look to blame. See, this is the problem. It's the policies of the government, right? So here's the thing. We are not God. So if we're to correct this spiritually, then we need to recognize that we are human and it is not our place to judge. That's the correct spiritual place to come from to correct this cognitive distortion. It's not our place to judge. It's not our place to judge. I want you to take note. Narcissists have these same cognitive distortions. Narcissists have these cognitive distortions, but they use things on the inverse. So whereas it would be common for a trauma survivor of complex trauma to blame themselves often, a narcissist will never blame themselves for something that happens. They will always blame others, and often they'll blame you as their counterpart. So pay attention to that. It's also cognitive distortion. Narcissists use the cognitive distortion against their target, and we'll talk about that as we go. Under decrees and judgments, there's this idea of fairness and rewards. That's the next cognitive distortion. Fairness and rewards is believing that good things will be rewarded in kind. So if you're a good person, then you're going to get good things that are going to happen for you in this life. If I'm a good person, then good things are going to happen for me in this life. I will be rewarded for the good I do. That is cognitive distortion. Because in this world that we live in, the reality is that good things aren't always happening for good people. Good people aren't always getting what they deserve. They're not always getting out of something what they put into something. Think about all of the good you've done for that narcissistic or borderline mate of yours. You could pour in to a borderline or narcissistic person and pour into them, and you won't necessarily get good out of that relationship, will you? So it's untrue that you're going to be rewarded for all the good you do. You could raise a child, you can care for that child, you can love that child can grow up to just totally spite you. I hate you, Mom. You're not always going to get rewarded for the good you do in this universe. So we have to see it as it really is so that we're not distorted in our thinking. And this is a weakness for me. I believe at times, or I have been known to believe, that if I just do good, then good things will happen to me as a result. That's not always the case. We need to recognize that it's not always the case. So we need to have pure motives in the good that we do, because we won't always be rewarded in this lifetime the good that we do. Right. This next cognitive distortion. Oh, by the way, narcissists, when it comes to fairness and rewards, if anything good happens, they reverse it and say, well, that's because I'm being rewarded for this and that. So they'll reverse any good thing that happens as being a reward for themselves. Yeah, of course this is happening for me. I'm worthy of it. I've earned this. I've attracted this into my life. Blah blah blah. So they reverse it to be an aid to their grandiosity. So to heal this with spirituality, we must recognize that fairness does not exist on this earth. Fairness is not in play on the earth that we live on right now. And not everyone gets rewarded in this lifetime. So we have to rely on the divine for our rewards. So we don't decide, I should be rewarded for this. I should he should be rewarded. That's not fair. Yes, you're right. You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair. So we rely on a higher power to decide and to judge who will be rewarded. And that's fixing the spiritual lapse. Let's look at emotional decrees. The next cognitive distortion is to make an emotional decree. This is to decree that what you feel must be true. Hey, Johnny, it's not true that you're not lovable. Well, I feel like I'm not lovable. It's not true that your mother hates you. Well, I feel like my mother hates me. This is an emotional decree. We are enacting that whatever we feel must be reality. This is very common for trauma survivors. We get the distorted thought that what we feel must be true. This is, of course, untrue. But what about narcissists? Well, they always feel that you must be cheating. They always feel that you must have a secret there and you must be hiding something. They always feel something negative about you, right? And so they decree that well, I feel it, so it must be real. It must be true. I know you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes. I know you have bad intentions, right? But just because we feel something doesn't mean it's true. So how do we heal this on a spiritual level? We must recognize that we cannot trust in our own hearts. You cannot trust in your own heart. The Bible says the heart is treacherous. The heart is treacherous. There's also a scripture that says God is greater than our hearts. So to heal this on a spiritual level, we have to recognize that just because we feel it doesn't mean it's real. Just because we feel doesn't mean it's real. Those are our personal internal emotions based on our own perceptions. God is greater than our hearts. So just because you feel like you're not lovable doesn't mean it's true. Let's look at should statements. Should statements. Should statements are basically making statements that are usually detrimental to ourselves or others using the word should. Here's a great one. Well, at 45, I should already have my own house. By 30, I should already have my own car. I always thought by 30, I would be married already. Should statements. With a should statement, you're essentially making a rule for life in the universe. You're saying, well, I think everyone should already be married at this time, or I feel like I should already own a house or own a business or be a millionaire at this time. And these should statements, they really just set you up to feel like a failure. You just framed yourself, you set yourself up to feel like a failure with your should statements. This is a decree. You are putting yourself in the place of God. You are making a rule for all things. It is a spiritual lapse. It's understandable. We all do it. So don't feel bad. But it's a spiritual lapse and we need to correct it. Should statements do not exist. And by the way, narcissists like to use the should statements against you. By now, you should already have a car. By now, you should know not to wear that. You should know. You should always serve me as my wife. They make the shoulds. And they use them against you. So how do we heal this in the spiritual? How do we heal the spiritual lapse? We must recognize that there are not universal rules for everything. There are not universal rules for everything. Every situation is different. Every individual needs to be judged as individual. So your situation is different. Where you came from, what you have in your life, what you had to overcome is separate. It is different. So you cannot judge everything on a universal basis and make a should statement that is a decree and putting yourself in the place of God. Every situation is unique, right? Now keep that in mind, because that's a spiritual principle that we have to grasp so that we can judge things in nuance. Every situation is unique. They're not all the same. Let's look at this next category. Nothing in moderation. Extreme thinking is the category. This is nothing in moderation. Okay. With extreme thinking, nothing in moderation, we're lacking on a spiritual level an understanding of the universe. We're lacking balance in our understanding of the universe. Now, again, don't feel bad. Everybody has cognitive distortions, every person. But we need to root these out so that we can heal. So let's do that now. Extreme thinking, we have overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is the idea where you can take a whole group of people and judge them one particular way. All men are worthless. All women are wicked and scheming. All men cheat. These are overgeneralizations. Doesn't have to be gender. We can use race, right? But we're basically making an extreme statement like we know all people. But again, aren't we kind of putting ourselves like having these godlike capabilities that aren't real? The reality of the universe, like we discussed, is that there is no universal rule for every person and every situation. There is no universal for every person in every situation. It must be judged individually. Not every man is awful or a cheater. Not every woman is scheming and conniving. Not every black or white person or short person or tall person. All of these generalizations need to stop. We cannot generalize. We must recognize that every situation is unique. Every experience is unique, and it needs to be handled as such. So sometimes when we have a bad experience, we overgeneralize. So we had a bad marriage to a man, and then we say, men are all, right? Your experience is unique to you. So judge it by the individual experience and say, that man is, not all men are, right? We don't want to overgeneralize our experience to mean that every other experience is like this. And I wish we could go into all the examples, but please take note that narcissists will use generalization, get their targets, and to their own benefit. Narcissists use generalization against their targets. So they'll say, you always, or all people are stupid except for me, right? And that's kind of the theme of a lot of their discussion. They come home from work and they tell you about how dumb everyone else was, or how everyone in church is so ridiculous, but they're the only ones who seem to get it. And so these overgeneralizations in their to their own advantage. On the other hand, there's personalization, which is almost doing the opposite. Now we're taking general things that are happening and we're personalizing it. We're saying, I must be the problem. I must be the problem. So there's a problem in the family, or there's your parents split up, and then you personalize it. Oh, my parents got divorced. It must be because of me. This is cognitive distortion, personalization. Or something bad happens out in the street, there's a robbery or there's a natural disaster, and again, you're personalizing it. Oh, this must have happened. I must be the problem. This must have happened because of me. They downsize at work, or they make changes in your company. You say, oh, this must be because I said something. I went to the boss. I did this. It's my fault, or I'm not doing good enough. That's personalization. Personalization is cognitive distortion. We need to root it out. It's a false belief that is detrimental to our lives. So again, we're seeing a lack of understanding of how the universe really works. This is kind of like the Truman Show complex. Like everything is because of you. I remember after watching that movie, it messed with my head. I was in high school at the time. And I thought, boy, what if everything is actually a plant around me? In that movie, Truman didn't realize he was a unwilling participant in an ongoing film that was being produced around him. So everyone was an actor except him. He was just living his life. So I wondered myself in high school, I was like, is everyone else around here just an actor? Am I being fooled? Because it's really weird in this school. It just feels really weird. So I would suddenly jump up in class and I would run to another classroom and look inside to see if everyone else was studying or if it was all a bunch of actors, and I would catch them behind the scenes, actually unready to be seen by me. So I had to make sure everyone wasn't just performing for me. Gratefully, once I got out of the institution of school, I had a better sense that there is a whole universe happening around us, and it is not all revolving around me. Not everyone is acting. So with this, we have a spiritual lapse in the understanding of the universe. You are not the center of the universe. Everything that happened is not because of you. Now, with narcissists, they like to take credit for anything that's happening that's good, and they personalize it to themselves, right? And so a narcissist will see a famous person come out with a new design, and they'll say, hey, you know what? That's the same design or the same idea, or that's the name that I came up with 10 years ago. You remember me saying that? They stole my idea. That famous person doesn't know you're a narcissistic husband or wife or mom, but they center themselves. Whatever's happening that's good, it's because of me. You know what? I think that person became famous or that law came into order because I came up with that idea, right? And so they use personalization like that. Again, we have that spiritual lapse. This is not how the universe works. You are not the center of the universe, right? And nor am I. So how do we understand the universe correctly? How do we correct this? We need to recognize that the whole universe is not centered around us. We are just one human among billions living today. That's all. You are just one human among billions. Now let's talk about extreme language. Bad things always, every single time. Imagine one spouse yelling at the other, you never help with the dishes. You never help with anything. Notice the extreme language. Always, never, anything, everything. This is the extreme language. We need to root it out. Extreme language is cognitive distortion. It's a distorted way of thinking, a distorted way of talking to ourselves, a distorted way of talking to others. It is detrimental to our relationships. We need to change that. And again, narcissist does the same thing. The narcissist will say, you always, you never. I remember one time my narcissistic wife, ex-wife now, she blamed, the windshield cracked because I was driving on a ramp up to the highway and there was a low-hanging branch and it knocked the windshield just in a way that ended up cracking the windshield. It was just a fluke accident. I was on my way to pick her up. She got in the car. She saw the cracked windshield. She gets on the phone with her friend, and I overhear her saying, everything he touches falls apart. I had that car for 4 years, kept it in pristine condition. But all of a sudden, everything I touched fell apart. This is the typical narcissist rhetoric. She used extreme language to smear me, and this is the way she was perceiving me. Of course, I had the windshield fixed the next day, and she had to eat her words. But notice the extreme language. The spiritual lapse here is that we're not using moderation. We're not controlling the power of the tongue. Our words need to be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that it doesn't come off as extreme. It makes it palatable. So when we talk to our spouse, then we say what? We don't say, you never help. We say, I would like more help from you. We use qualifiers. Sometimes, some people, most of the time, I'm often feeling like I am the main one washing the dishes. We get away from the extreme language. Again, to solve this spiritual problem, we control the power of the tongue. We use moderation in our speech. Making sense? Under nothing in moderation or extreme thinking, we have perfectionism. The idea or the cognitive distortion of perfectionism is, well, everything must be perfect or something must be perfect, right? Perfectionists like to believe that they can create perfection. So they scrub their floor and they don't stop until it's perfect the way mother would like it. Or a perfectionist will procrastinate on the assignment because they know they've got to write the best speech or give the best presentation or turn in the best assignment, and it's got to be amazing. Everyone has to be blown away. And they set the bar so high that they can't even get started. So perfectionism is extreme thinking, it's cognitive distortion, and it damages, it hurts our life. So you have to root it out. Of course, narcissism is the perfectionism on you, right? So you are never good enough. There's always something you're doing wrong, something that's out of place, something that's not right about you, right? So narcissists use this cognitive distortion as well. You see with the complex trauma survivor, that pattern, how they're using the distortion on themselves, and then the narcissist comes in and uses the distortion on them as well. That's why they get along so well. That's why they end up in a marriage. That's why you keep ending up with narcissistic partners, because you both have the same view on the universe and on yourself, which is that everything is your fault and that you are awful and that the universe is this extreme place. So you both have the same viewpoint. So we need to get away from people with those thoughts, and we need to get those thoughts out of ourselves. So how do we correct that spiritual lapse? Well, spiritually speaking, we would recognize nothing is perfect except God, right? No one on this earth's surface is perfect. And so we cannot get perfection in this lifetime. So we should not pursue perfection in a literal sense. We should not pursue perfection in a literal sense. Is this stuff hitting home? Let's hit this last category. Negative filtering. This is being the devil's advocates. This is being the devil's advocate. You are now siding with the devil in your thoughts. Why? Because you want to harp on, you want to focus on all the negative. And so we got first catastrophizing, which I've grouped together with jumping to conclusions. Catastrophizing and jumping to conclusions is, I would apply there, but if I applied there, I wouldn't be hired. Or worst case scenario, catastrophizing. Definitely my children are dead. They haven't called me, they must be dead. Or we're going to get in a car accident. I just feel like something bad is going to happen. It's catastrophizing. It's focusing on the worst case scenario. What's the problem on a spiritual level? You're saying that you can predict the future. Spiritually, we must recognize our limitation as terrestrial beings. Humans were not made to predict the future. You do not have the gift of predicting the future. Humans were not made to predict the future. We must leave that in the hands of the divine, the Most High. Humans are made to see what is in front of them and have imagination. So you are using your imagination to further the devil's agenda by focusing on all the bad, to give yourself terror. And isn't that what the devil would want? For you to be in fear and in terror. So to fix this, we need to have courage, to be courageous, to be faithful, which means we would need to focus our mind on all of the positive that could happen. So instead of catastrophizing to the worst that can happen, we should focus on we should say, it could all work out. No news is good news. Probably everything is fine with my children. We don't catastrophize. We focus on the best possible case scenario, right? It'll all work out. Also, we should recognize I can't read. I can't predict the future. I cannot predict the future. And the next one, right alongside, and this is a cousin of the fortune telling, the future telling, which is cognitive distortion, is mind reading. Mind reading is believing you know what other people are thinking and you know what their intentions are. I know you did that on purpose. Cognitive distortion. Cognitive distortion. They probably think I'm stupid. Cognitive distortion. Narcissists think they can mind, and they say, I know you have bad intentions. I know you're scheming against me. I know you're cheating, right? The complex trauma survivors think they can read everyone else's mind. I know they're judging me. I know they think I'm bad. I know they think I'm stupid, right? That's mind reading. It's cognitive distortion, right? We don't have the ability to read everyone's mind. We don't know what they're thinking. All we're doing is negative filtering, and we're being the devil's advocate. Because when we mind read, notice we're always telling ourselves the worst case scenario. So what's best to correct this spiritually is to assume the best. We should assume the best about people. We should assume they're thinking good thoughts because we're thinking good thoughts as well. We're thinking good thoughts toward them. We should assume they're thinking good thoughts towards us. We shouldn't assume everyone is prejudiced or racist. We should assume they're not because we're not. And if I'm not, then perhaps you're not as well. When we focus on the positive, then we're seeing things from the way God sees people and God sees things. Also prepare our bodies so that we're not getting a flood of cortisol, so that we're having a better immune system and we're more capable of going out and facing the reality, so that when something bad does happen, we're able to handle it because we're not flooding our system constantly with cortisol. So discrediting the positive is another negative filtering. Discrediting the positive is where there could be something good in your life, but you discredit that and you just focus on the negative. Hey, you just got a promotion. Yeah, but the boss is really a jerk. And now I got to work closer to him. Hey, you're doing really good on your assignments. Yeah, but I got help. It's not all because of me. I got help, right? You discredit your achievements. You discredit your positives. It's focusing on all the bad. It's focusing on all the negative. We don't want to do that. That's what the devil would want us to do. Instead, we should correct this spiritually. And by the way, the narcissist uses this on you, right? They discredit all your positive. Yeah, but you had help. Yeah, but I really helped you with that, right? They want to discredit all your positive and achievements. But we correct this in ourselves by focusing on the positive. So instead of saying, well, the boss is, but we say, I did get a promotion and I'm grateful. I did get a promotion and I'm proud of myself. It's okay to be proud of yourself. Or, yeah, I can admit I've done pretty well on my assignments and I have worked hard for that. And I'm going to focus on the positive because I'm doing good. I'm getting good marks. So instead of discrediting the positive, we should focus on the positive. We should actually discredit the negative in most cases, because we need to protect ourselves from the negative environment around us. So instead of looking at things from the negative perspective, we say, but I got a flat tire, but we're still alive. Got a flat tire, but we're still, it is discrediting the negative. That's how we fix discrediting the positive. So we must focus on the positive. This way, we're seeing the potential good in all. And isn't that the way God sees things? He sees the potential in all things. And then finally, we have focusing on the void. This is a cognitive distortion that I added to the chart. And it's one I discovered that is very common in those who are suffering from depression and anxiety. Focusing on the void of what you do not have and what you cannot control. Focusing on the void of what you do not have and what you cannot control. This is cognitive distortion. He's being mean to me. You're focusing on what you cannot control. They're laying people off. You're focusing on what you cannot control. Yeah, but I still never got my raise. You're focusing on what you do not have. I still don't have kids. Focusing on, I don't have a husband. Focusing on what you do not have. I have no one. I have no friends. I have no mom. You're focusing on what you do not have. It's cognitive distortion. It's detrimental. It's a detrimental way of thinking, and it's playing the devil's advocate. So we need to stop. We need to stop. That's just what the devil would want us to focus on, what we do not have, so that we can be covetous and focus on what everybody else got. So we correct this spiritually by always focusing on what we do have. And Jesus said to those who have more will be given in the parable of the talents. He showed that by focusing on what we can do and what we do have, we will gain favor from a heavenly standpoint. So we must focus on what we have and expound on it, build on that. Build from what you have. Focus on your strengths, not what someone else. I don't like my hair. No. That's your hair. Focus on your hair. It's cool. Some people want curly hair. You got the curly hair. Some people want straight hair. You got the straight hair. Whatever you got, focus on that. Focus on that. Love that. Love what you have. Love what you have. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So hopefully this discussion on cognitive distortions has been helpful for you. And as you can see from our discussion, there is that spiritual aspect.